Hello there, and welcome back to A Rose Within the Thorns. That's right, it is the podcast where we carefully prune back confusion, we trim away all of the fluff, and we help your ideas actually bloom. Season 4. Who would have thought it? In this season, we're shifting from analysis to creation. That's right, this season is all about narrative writing. So, whether you are in year 7 and you're just learning how to structure a story, or you're maybe in year 12 and crafting that high level imaginative response under exam pressure, this is the season for you. Because here's the truth: most narratives fail for one simple reason: nothing escalates. Today, we're going to be climbing Story Mountain. So, what is a story mountain? The story mountain is that framework that we use for structuring a narrative. It consists of the different components that guide the flow of a story. You may know this as this one on the screen right now. So here we have our introduction, our rising action, and our climax. We have our falling action, and lastly, our conclusion. So let me describe a common student narrative. And these are ones that I've read before. It was a normal day. I woke up, I brushed my teeth, then something bad happened. The end. That is not a mountain. That's a speed bump. A narrative needs shape, it needs tension, it needs some rising pressure. So, in my slides, I'm going to break down this using the story mountain structure. But I don't want to use this version here. What I want to do is I want to use the upgraded version, which you might be a little bit more familiar with as the 7 steps to narrative writing. Except the only difference here is I've added a couple of images and you can clearly see that it consists of those two mountains. So firstly, we have our sizzling start, our backfill. We then get into our problems with our pebble, our rock, and our boulder, and we conclude with our exciting ending. If you remember nothing else from this podcast, remember this: a story is a series of problems that gets worse until the character is able to overcome them. So, a sizzling start. This is the hook to your story. The sizzling start is where something interesting, strange, emotional, or dangerous happens immediately. It's not an explanation. It's not a biography. It's not "my name is." It's about action. In the example in the next slide, we're going to have a look at how Doug almost falls off the mountain in the first paragraph. To refresh your memory, who is Doug? That is this little guy standing at the sizzling start. So we're going to have a look at how he goes through the 7-step story mountain. So we are thrown into some problems in here with slipping boots, cracking ice, and that's building our tension. So for year 7, if you are looking at that, this means that you need to start with a moment of action. Something needs to be happening. I don't want this waking up and brushing your teeth and having toast for breakfast, because that's pretty boring. Maybe start with the fact that the toaster is on fire. Or maybe you've woken up and you've gone to get toothpaste to find a large crocodile in your shower. If you are at the opposite end and you are more year 12, this means you need to have control in that immediacy. So use sensory detail, manipulate your pacing here. Start in media res if needed, right, within the action. So curiosity drives reading. Don't answer every question yet. Just make us lean forward and want to continue reading. So here is our sizzling start example. The world dropped away beneath Doug's boots. He leaned out over the ridge, pulled toward the view. Clouds drifted through the valley like a wide ocean, rolling between dark stone peaks. For a moment, he'd forgotten the cold, the ache of his calves, and the sharp sting of the thin air in his lungs. His heel slipped. Ice cracked. His body tipped forward, arms windmilling. The mountainside rushed up to meet him. Doug lunged and grabbed a jagged outcrop. His chest slammed into the rock and he dangled there, boots scraping uselessly against the slope. Below him, the drop fell hundreds of meters, a dizzying blur of cliffs and snowfields. He hauled himself up with shaking arms and collapsed onto the ledge, breathing hard. Good start, he muttered to himself, staring at the sky. He could not afford mistakes like that. Not today. See how already in our sizzling start, we've started in a moment of action. It's not about him taking those first couple of steps on the mountain, but he's actually already there, and he's already dealing with a little bit of a problem. It's dropped us in a moment of action. If you describe this as the moment he got out of his car and he started walking towards the mountain and he was walking on the rocks and the grass, it's pretty boring. So make sure your start is sizzling. When we then move on to our backfill, so now that you've hooked your reader, you need to make sure that you answer the questions. So when I say the questions, you need to make sure you have answered who, what, when, where, and why. Generally, you're going to go back and answer the why in this section. Why is your character doing what they're doing? So we know for Doug, he is on a mountain, but we don't know why he's there. So what we're going to do is we're going to write that maybe he's entered a competition to win $50,000. So now we understand Doug's goal, his motivation, and the stakes of actually wanting to win. So the backfill needs to be brief. Too much, and the story feels like it's stalling. I don't want a flashback. I just want you to go back and make sure that I don't have any questions about who, what, when, where, or why. So if you are older students, this is where you are going to layer in maybe some character psychology, those background thoughts of your character, maybe some subtext, or maybe some thematic undertones. But make sure you keep it controlled. Backfill is there to support the next part of your writing. It doesn't replace it. So let's have a look at Doug. So 3 months earlier, he had filled in an online form during a late night scroll. Summit Sprint Challenge. First person to reach the peak wins $50,000. At the time, it sounded almost exciting, almost achievable. Train a bit, hike a lot, reach the top. Now, halfway up the mountain, with frost forming on his eyebrows and his fingers numb inside thick gloves, it felt less like a challenge and more like survival. Still, he needed the prize. Bills waited at home, and this was his one ridiculous chance to fix things. Doug adjusted his backpack straps and pushed forward. The summit ridge rose above him, closer than it had been all morning. He imagined a finish flag, cameras, maybe even applause. He smiled and kept climbing. If we jump back quickly and we have a look back at my 7-step story mountain, we can see that Doug in our sizzling start is on that mountain and he's having that little bit of a trouble where he's windmilling and he's maybe will fall. See our backfill, it's kind of that dip in the mountain. It's a little bit boring, but it's going to help us boost ourselves to go up that second mountain. We need to know the who, what, when, where, and why. So, we then move on to our pebble, rock, and boulder. This is where we are tightening tension. So we need to introduce the first small problem. The pebble is minor. It's something that's frustrating or annoying to the character. For us, we're going to have Doug trip over his shoelace. It's not life-threatening, but it signals something important. The journey will not be easy. This is a pacing control. If your narrative jumps straight from calm to a catastrophe, the reader does not feel the climb. They're not there with Doug experiencing what he is experiencing. So tension must rise gradually. Let's have a look at our pebble. 10 careful steps later, his boot caught. His shoelace had come loose and wrapped around a cramp and spike. His foot locked mid-stride, and he pitched forward into the snow. He lay there for a second, face buried in powder. You have got to be kidding me. He rolled over, laughed weakly, and retied the lace with stiff fingers. A small mistake, nothing serious. He stood and continued. The wind picked up, throwing fine snow across the slope. We are now onto our rock. So, we now need to remove something helpful. We need a bigger problem that's seriously going to affect Doug. What we need to do here, the stakes increase. Your character could fail, but they're going to press forward to get to that next boulder. So we need a setback. We need a loss of something helpful. We need a little bit of a harder challenge. So for Doug, he's going to lose his backpack. In his backpack, let's say that there's food, water, maybe something safety, and maybe something communication. The loss is going to create this sense of urgency. He's going to panic that he's lost this. If your character never loses anything, the reader will never worry, and that means that your reader's not going to be invested in the story. You need to have them stressed out a little. So, senior students, you might want to think metaphorically as well. What emotional resource could be lost? Trust, confidence, maybe hope. So, physical and emotional stakes can mirror each other as well. In our rock, we have the ground suddenly softened beneath him. Doug's foot plunged through a crust of ice and he lost balance. He slid, first slowly, then faster, tumbling down the slope in a spray of snow. He tried to dig his ice axe into the surface, but missed. The mountain spun around him. His backpack ripped loose. He watched helplessly as it bounced ahead, struck a rock edge, and disappeared into the black opening of a cave below. His food, water, radio, and spare gloves vanished. Doug slammed into a drift and stopped. Silence settled over the mountainside. Then a low growl echoed from the cave. You could probably already tell here that we are now at our boulder. This is the peak of our mountain, the worst moment, the crisis. For us, we need immediate danger and pressure. We need some fast pacing. We need high stakes. This is the emotional and action climax. The reader should be wondering, how's your character going to get out of this situation? So, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the bear coming out of the cave and charging at Doug. What I want you to do is I want you to notice what changes. My sentences are going to become shorter, my pacing speeds up, and my focus narrows. The reader should be thinking, oh my God, there is no way out. That is exactly the point. If the boulder feels manageable, like you could deal with it, it's not a boulder, is it? So let's have a look. Snow shifted near the opening. A huge brown bear pushed its head into the light and sniffed the air. Its eyes locked on to Doug. They stared at each other. Hi, Doug whispered. The bear roared and charged uphill. Doug ran. He scrambled up the slope, legs burning, breath tearing at his chest. Behind him, claws scraped rock and snow. He did not think about the competition anymore. He only thought about not becoming lunch. The ridge appeared ahead. He stumbled onto it and waved his arms wildly. Help! So, what you can see here is we are now moving into our exciting ending. Let's have a look at how this looks. So in our exciting ending, this is where we release the tension. You're worried that the bear's going to get Doug, so what we're going to do is have Doug rescued by the helicopter. But you're going to notice something powerful here. We're going to add a little bit more to our story and have Doug not care about winning anymore. Maybe he's just happy to get off the mountain, and it shows some character growth. So a good ending does three things. It solves the main problem, it provides closure, and it offers reflection. So for year 7, this might be a simple lesson. For year 12, this could connect to your theme, maybe identity, power, resilience, or belonging. Either way, something needs to change in the end. The exciting ending could be something as exciting as a helicopter, or it could be something as exciting as a personal journey. So if your character is the same at the end, the journey really meant nothing. So, a distant chopping sound answered. A rescue helicopter curved around the peak and hovered over him, rotors whipping snow into a blizzard. A rescuer lowered a cable. Doug clipped in just as the bear reached the base of the ridge, pacing and roaring. Moments later, he lifted into the air. Inside the helicopter, he collapsed onto the floor, laughing and shaking at the same time. You almost made the summit, the rescuer shouted over the noise. Doug looked back at the shining peak and then at the enormous bear shrinking below. Honestly, he said, catching his breath, I'm happy just making it off the mountain. So, we need to think about our structure. So your sizzling start is all about grabbing your reader's attention. Your backfill is explaining the situation. The pebble is your small problem, the rock, a bigger problem, the boulder, a huge problem. And the exciting ending needs to have the problem solved with some sort of growth. So, even simpler, it's a story is a series of problems that gets worse until the character overcomes them. I want to prune some of the thorns around writing a story. So, some common mistakes. Thorn number one: don't give too much backstory at the start. Thorn number two: you need to make sure that you have a problem that actually does escalate. If you don't have a problem that gets worse and worse and worse, then it doesn't really add to your Pebble Rock and Boulder. Thorn number three: you need an ending that is meaningful. Don't just stop it. We don't want to happily ever after. We want some sort of growth or maybe a shocking ending as well. Thorn number four: you don't want a crisis, that's your boulder, that feels small. So when you're writing, ask yourself, what does my character want? What stands in their way? What do they lose? And what changes in them? So your narrative is a controlled pressure. You're not telling us what happened. You're designing tension. So make sure you bring the story to a satisfying conclusion. Reflect on those experiences of your characters and any of those lessons learned, and end with a final thought or resolution that leaves your reader with a sense of closure or reflection. Well, this has been episode 1 of season 4, where we are focusing on narrative writing. Maybe in another episode, we might look at pacing or how sentence length controls tension. We may also look at how we incorporate some of our literary devices, such as metaphors, similes, personification, onomatopoeia. I mean, the list goes on, into writing our short stories. Remember, a story is not a recount, it's a mountain, and you are the architect of every step in that mountain. So, until you watch one of my next videos, keep pruning the unnecessary, strengthen your structure, and remember, you have got this. See you in episode 2.